Welcome to the midweek message. We're reading from Proverbs chapter 16. We're going to begin in verse 9, and I'm reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. This verse is similar to verse 1 of the same chapter, which says the preparations of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. You can plan your life, and I hope that you do. But it is God that is going to have the ultimate say in your endeavors and the things that you are able to accomplish on this earth. We can only do the things that God enables us to do. And that's not an excuse for not trying. But God directs our steps regardless of the plans that we make. And that doesn't mean that our plans are not important and that they can't work hand in hand with the plan of God, or that they cannot thwart the plan of God in some degree. But make no mistake, God is in control. Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. The next few verses have to do with the king of a kingdom. And I usually apply those types of things to ruling authorities in our economy, in our country. Of course, they would apply to any authority around the world throughout all time, but these references are to the king of a kingdom. Verse 10, divination is on the lips of the king, his mouth must not transgress in judgment. Honest weights and scales are the Lord's, all the weights in the bag are his work. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him who speaks what is right. As messengers of death is the king's wrath, but a wise man will appease it. In the light of the king's face is life, and his favor is like a cloud of the latter rain. Those are verses 10 through 15 of Proverbs 16. Notice what is said about the king, the ultimate ruling authority. Because the words of the king are so weighty, because they have such impact, the scripture says in verse 10 that he must not transgress in judgment. Now, it is certainly true that no one should make faulty judgments, let alone evil judgments. But the real truth is that the decisions of some are more weighty and affect more people than do the decisions of others. This is something that the governing authorities in our country would do well to consider. The decisions that are made by our rulers are weighty indeed, and they will answer to God for their positions and their power, just as you and I will answer to God for ours. Because the king's words are so impactful, he must be careful not to transgress, make bad judgments. Verse 11, honest weights and scales are the Lord's, all the weights in the bag are his work. There is a lot of scripture given to fairness and equity and even-handedness in scripture. There are all kinds of ways to cheat monetarily today. We can do it through computers. We can do it through cooking the books. In scriptural times where they used weights as a form of measurement, there were various ways that they could cheat one another through that means. And there's a lot of scripture given to honesty and just weight. As a matter of fact, when the scripture says, or the principle is taught in scripture, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, what that actually refers to is fairness in judgment. Not treating one person one way and another person another way. The punishment for one should be the same as for another. That is not to say that all cases are the same, but there has to be equity in judgment. And so God puts great value on honest weights. Back to the king. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established by righteousness. Again, our government today in America, governments around the world, they are responsible to God to be righteous. And that is not righteousness in their eyes. It is righteousness in the eyes of God. It's simply not enough for our country to say, well, we voted on it. And that may be the way we do things, but we'll answer God for it. Because a throne, a dominion, a power, a government is established. It is given firm foundations and structure by righteousness. And so it's an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, because their deeds are more impactful than the deeds of common people like you and I. The delight of kings, verse 13 says, are righteous lips. They love the person who speaks what is right. Nobody likes to be lied to. Everyone will like you better if you tell the truth. And to have a good reputation, a reputation for truth, is extremely valuable. And you will have honor in the sight of ruling authorities. As you will even have honor in the sight of your enemies if you will simply be truthful. What's the king's wrath like? Verse 14 tells us that. The king's wrath is like the messenger of death, but a wise person will appease it. One of the tenets of wisdom is knowing how to swim in different seas. And by that, I'm not talking about how to be overly flexible. I'm not talking about being a compromiser. But it is wisdom to know how that you should act in the various situations that you find yourself in life. Sometimes we find that what works in one situation is not the right thing for another. But you need to learn how to move effortlessly and inoffensively through the work environment. You need to know how to do that in the community. You need to know how to do that in the political environment. The king's wrath is like a messenger of death. But a wise person knows how to be at peace with the king. I understand that some of the things that our ruling authorities do irritate you. Some of them are flatly just not right. Peter still said, honor the emperor. And the scripture still tells us to live a peaceable life and to give honor to those that God has placed in authority. I understand there have been many wicked men and women that have held seats of power. But the king's message, his wrath, is like a messenger of death. A wise person knows how to appease it. We can make enemies in this life if we want, but we might be better served if we remain influential. And verse 15, the last that I read, the light of the king's face is life, and his favor is like a cloud of the latter rain. You want to be thought well of by even those that are in power in this world, if you can be. want to be able to gain the favor of men and women in this life. And you will have a better chance of doing that if you have gained the favor of God.